Hello everybody and welcome back for some weekly VR news. As always, I'm Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. So in many ways, this is another typical week with some cool games releasing, plenty of updates and new announcements, but unfortunately we might have some really bad news for the PlayStation VR2. Now we'll get into all of that and much more in today's video, and there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but before we jump in, this video is brought to you by my sponsor, Kiwi Design. Kiwi has accessories for all of your favorite headsets, and they finally started releasing some new products for the Quest 3. On screen, we have their brand new extra comfy Quest 3 Elite strap. I've been using head straps from Kiwi for years now, and they're hands down my favorite. There's a link to Kiwi down in the description, and don't forget to use discount code Mateo311 for 5% off and to help support my channel. Okay, so let's start things off like normal with the check-in, and that's what exactly have I been up to in the VR world. And recently I put out a video about some hidden gem games and you guys gave me recommendations. A bunch of them I haven't tried, so I'm trying to get back to some of those games, see what they're all about. And additionally, I'm just playing Asgard's Wrath 2 again. I still absolutely love that game. It wasn't a honeymoon phase. The game is just fantastic. But for now, let's move on to new releases, starting with Rogue Ascent making its way onto PSVR. This game was previously available from MetaQuest headsets, and it's one of the only shooters that relied entirely on hand tracking rather than using controllers. Well, hand tracking is no longer really an option as it's moving over to PSVR, so now we can finally experience this unique roguelike shooter with full controller support. Now this does unfortunately take away one of the main aspects that made the title unique, namely the hand tracking. So there was no controllers, you did everything movement with just your hands, and now you're going back to controller tracking, but it still has unique mechanics. It'll still be a fun game to play, and I'm just happy more people get to experience it. But let's move on to even newer games, starting with Riven. The sequel to the stunning puzzler Myst is dropping this week, and it's looking prettier than ever. Riven drops you into a world where its civilization is on the brink of collapse. There's an intriguing storyline of betrayal to uncover as you navigate through some stunning landscapes solving puzzles. So if you enjoy exploration and head-scratching challenges, or you were a fan of the previous title Myst, you'll most likely want to pick this one up too. Now unfortunately, unless we get some surprises, these are the only games planned to release this week. But if you're looking for new stuff, we do have the Upload VR Summer Showcase coming, which will definitely show off some new titles, or at least new footage we haven't seen yet. So I'm looking forward to that. Let me know if you guys want me to stream it. Maybe I'll consider that. On the topic of streaming, I'm still doing my Thursday streams, which are fantastic. I love hanging out with you guys, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. Let's just move on to new announcements because we just got the release date for Death Game Hotel. Death Game Hotel promises to be a disturbing, story-driven title where you're playing a game of death poker, betting your own limbs in the process. Now at minimum, this game is at least intriguing. There's honestly nothing quite like it that I can think of. So I'm excited to jump into this. I don't really know how I feel just yet. It looks super creepy, but I want to experience it, and I'll tell you guys all about it when it's finally here on July 11th, which is right around the corner. But let's move on to an update for the much older title Exorcist Legion VR. This classic and absolutely still terrifying horror game just received a Quest 3 update. This visual update has not only improved the character models, but also improved the overall frame rate and introduced some dynamic shadows. Now they've also introduced a bunch of additional updates, like no loading time between rooms, which is great because you don't want to break the immersion, that overall tension, or maybe you do, but honestly for the experience, you shouldn't. It's a great, terrifying game. So if you're looking for some survival horror and you've never played The Exorcist, go check it out. It's a classic. Now we just have a few more topics to get through before we get to today's main event, the PlayStation VR2, but it seems like Sony's not the only one with some bad news. Apparently Meta's long-awaited mixed reality feature Augments still needs a bit more time in the oven. Now there's been a bunch of hype about these, the ability to add some virtual elements to your real-life environment, and I will say I absolutely love the concept, but they do have to nail the implementation. If Augments release in a gimmicky or even worse, broken fashion, it'll be really hard for Meta to restore faith in a product like that. And this is really in line with where they want to bring XR to. They want you to have your headset on 24/7, not yet, but in the future, and have this extra virtual layer of things you could access that other people can't see unless they're cool enough to also be wearing one of Meta's devices. Now that's 5+ years out, but that's the direction they're heading in. And if they introduce that direction in a really poor fashion, yeah, it's going to be hard to recover from. So take your time, let it cook as long as it needs to, and then just impress us when it's ready. Now, speaking of being impressed, it looks like the Meta Quest 2 and 3 headsets could get eye tracking as a really cheap add-on. The company Inselumi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, has announced a $160 cameraless eye tracking solution for the Quest 2 and Quest 3 headsets. Now, instead of using infrared illuminators combined with infrared cameras, they've opted for much cheaper photo sensors. Supposedly, this results in a product that is much cheaper to manufacture, requires a lot less battery to operate than infrared cameras, and still has excellent performance with low latency and high accuracy. Now, I'm obviously skeptical that any third-party product like this would ever catch on. External support is always iffy. Most people won't have it, so developers are not going to program for it. But at minimum, this could be the start of really cheap integration of eye tracking. Now, it is a feature that is really cool when you use it and has some great performance benefits. So moving forward, I'd love to see eye tracking in headsets, but what holds it back right now is the huge price tag. Now, if a third-party company can produce this at $160 aftermarket, integrating this into a headset from Meta will actually be significantly cheaper, and I'm excited for the future now. This little third-party product, which is usually, something like that's a throwaway, can turn into a much brighter future. But for now, let's do a full 180 and get pessimistic about the future of the PlayStation VR2. A recent article from Android Central has recently made some bold statements regarding Sony's position on the PlayStation VR2. Now, I know plenty of people want to dismiss or discredit this article, but I have to say it's in line with what I've been talking about and what I've heard from multiple other sources for the past months now. I know the community gets pissed any time I talk about the PlayStation VR2, but I'm always trying to keep it real. Today, I'm going to break down some of the information I've previously said, why lots of things in this article make sense, and why the people who don't want to believe it are pretty much just ignorant on how the overall industry works. Now, I'm not going to harp on this. I don't really enjoy crapping on the PlayStation VR2, which some people believe. Some people think that I have any opportunity to just crap on this system I take. No, it's just I know plenty of information. I've been seeing the path of where this headset's going, and ultimately it has disappointed me. I got the hardware, which was offered to me for free, but I said, nope, Sony, I want to have a good relationship with you guys. You don't have to send me one for free. I'm going to pay for this. I believe in the product. Let's go. I wanted my first party games, and it's been a major disappointment. Yes, there are some amazing games that are only on the PlayStation VR2, and if it's the only VR headset you have, it is completely capable. You're getting a bunch of good games, it's solid hardware, you get some great visuals from the PlayStation 5, but if you're someone who's deeply invested in VR, got it for exclusives, it's an extreme disappointment, and it looks like the first-party games are not coming anymore. The article says that there's only 2 in production from Sony, and they believe they'll never see the light of day, and I would agree with that. So let's just jump back and wrap everything up. I'm going to go super fast because, again, I don't want to harp on this. Originally, the PlayStation VR2 sales, Sony was hoping to match or maybe slightly surpass the PlayStation VR1, and it started off like that. It started off around a roughly the same curve, going pretty well, but now it's pretty much downhill, and this headset is selling a lot worse than the PlayStation VR1. You might want to say, Matt, you don't have the numbers. That's bull. A third-party company has pretty much, looked into this, and the number I've received from multiple developers and the third-party company is under 2 million sales. That's what I'm seeing across the board. And that includes PlayStation VR2s that are sitting in Walmart right now that they have an inventory of that they're not selling. Kind of something that reiterates that is the fact that we heard that Sony is no longer producing PlayStation VR2s because they have an overstock. And it looks like to get rid of that overstock, they came out with the adapter for PSVR. So at least someone might buy these things. And if you guys don't agree with me, you think, oh, this is bull, that's fine. But what I always say, if the numbers were good, they'd release them. If the sales for the PlayStation VR2 were good, they'd give you those numbers. But not to stay on that, we'll just look at game development. Multiple studios have decided to say, you know what? We're not going to produce our game on the PlayStation VR2 because it's not worth it. Most notably, Rec Room came out. Rec Room they got money to burn. You know, like they're like Scrooge McDuck diving into gold coins. They got money to burn, and they just said it doesn't make sense to produce the game for the PlayStation VR2. It's not viable, or it's not financially viable. Doesn't make sense economically. And that's repeated in other games. If you look at their own stats from Resident Evil 4 Remake, only 120,000 or 1.7% of the players have actually played that game in VR. That's a huge, extremely popular title. And we're talking about 120,000. Might sound great to you, but that's a profit of maybe 3 million, which makes the port not viable. Sony paid Capcom 5 million to bring Resident Evil 7 over to VR. So now they're getting paid even less. Okay, it's a remake this year, but it's not in Sony's best interest. If they had to pay 5 million for that, well, guess what? They didn't make close to that because Sony's only taken a 30% cut. So maybe $1 million. If they gave a $5 million investment to get $1 million back, you lost $4 million. So the numbers don't work there. And that's just direct proof of it. So the whole concept of hybrid games just isn't happening. It doesn't make sense. It's not worth it for the developers. They're not going to make the extra cash by selling to VR users. So the hybrid games is out. It's not profitable. Sony, if they really wanted to build the PlayStation VR2 community, yeah, they would have had to throw down a lot of dough up front to kind of push this, what Meta is doing, but they can't keep up. And they shouldn't. It doesn't make sense financially. And Sony has been kind of restructuring because they are suffering a bit. They're trying to make more money, and they're not going to put money into a failing portion of their business. That's just how it is. This has nothing to do with PlayStation VR2 isn't good. The games aren't good. The experience isn't good. It's simple financials. So we'll get third-party games coming to the PlayStation VR2 as long as development studios think it makes sense financially. So I'd say a bunch of them will come, probably a good portion, like 80% or so. Obviously, the Meta exclusives will never come to anybody else, but it'll be hit and miss for future titles. I doubt we're going to get any PlayStation VR2 exclusives at all because Sony's not going to be throwing money to developers to produce games on their hardware. I mean, honestly, look what happened with Firewall Ultra. They threw them apparently like $15 million. Now this I heard secondhand, but then they said, nope, you got to push your game out now. Developers were saying, hey, we're really not ready. Game flops. The studio is now gone. So working on the PlayStation VR2 exclusively has crashed their studio. I think that says it all. I don't want to harp on this, and I'm not here to say I told you so, but I've been saying this message over and over again, expressing it. There's so many other elements and layers to this. I've spoken to developers. They said it looks like Sony's pulling out of VR. So honestly, I hate to end the video on such a sour note. I really wished the best for the PlayStation VR 2. I was so pumped for when it was announced. I thought we were finally going to get some higher quality VR games, but unfortunately that's just not the case. Now, if you guys have any additional questions or just want to add to this conversation, please drop some comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. If you enjoyed this video or just want to help support the channel, make sure to give a thumbs up. And if you're new here, go ahead and listen to this kid.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for my daddy.
Good job.
Bye.